Commission. It is February 9th, 2021. You should all have an agenda. Those of you tuning in that would like to see the agenda, you can find that on the Bath Township website. Are there any changes to the agenda as distributed? Nick?
There's one. How about election of officers?
We still do have to do that. And now we're in our position to actually do it. Yep. Let's put that under new business item E, I guess.
The other thing I was going to suggest is switching old and new business. Don't want to keep these applicants here all night if we don't have to.
Yep, I'm fine with that. Any objections, planning commissioners? Likely not. Okay, so a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Is there one?
So move.
Support.
And support. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. And the motion carries. The agenda has been approved. Are there any conflicts of interest that planning commissioners have with any of the agenda items tonight? If so, please state them. Okay, hearing none, let's move on. This is the first opportunity of 2 for general public comment. So you can comment on agenda items or non-agenda items. And if you would like to speak, you can raise your Zoom hand, raise your real hand, or somehow signal to us that you'd like to speak. Anybody like to speak at this time? Not seeing anything, not seeing any signs one way or the other. Okay, let's move on. So we have minutes from January 26, 2021. Any changes to those minutes as distributed?
I move they be approved as printed.
Seconded.
Support. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the same sign. And the minutes of January 26, 2021 are approved. Nick, do you have any communications for us this time?
Nothing too terribly important. I'll save it for a report from planner.
Okay, good enough. All right, so then let's move on to new business. So the first item that we have is a site plan and special use permit for 7551 Coleman Road. And this is a project, at least we had some introduction to it, not the site plan or special use, but we did have a zoning request for this property. So Nick, do you want to lead us into this?
Sure. So as you said, Dan, we are familiar with this because it was recently rezoned. This is just a reminder, it's to conduct an expansion to the existing self-storage facility by adding 2 additional buildings on that southwest side. As you'll see in the staff report, all of that information should be there. Agency comments are still ongoing. I've received a couple of agency comments back. Again, nothing too terribly pressing, but need to get all of those comments back before we can schedule that public hearing and a vote on this project. One thing I would like to note, and I'm sure some of you noticed this, there are not buffer yards depicted on there yet. The applicant is aware of that, and they are intending to have a discussion with the Planning Commission about the possibility of some flexibility there in terms of using some of the existing deciduous trees instead of planting additional evergreen trees. But I'll let the applicant speak to that. And the applicant is here, so any questions that you all have, they can answer or I can try to answer.
And who is the applicant?
So we have a couple different parties involved here. Oliver Architecture is the sort of overarching applicant, and then they are also working with Powell Engineering on some of the work. So Brian Biskner is here from Powell Engineering, and then we also have Mary Kate McCafferty from Oliver Architecture.
Okay, great. So yeah, this is really a kind of a preliminary discussion about the site plan, hopefully to sort of head off any concerns that planning commissioners might have and to make the process go easier for everybody. And as Nick said, we'll get in all the agency comments, which is a really important part of the site plan process. But before we get into planning commissioner comments and or questions, would either the applicant or applicant representative want to say anything? Brian?
There we go. Yeah, if you were able to, could you give me document sharing, and I'll go over the project real quick, and then we can get your input.
Document sharing meaning?
I think share screen.
Yeah,
I think
I'm giving him access right now.
Okay, can everybody see that?
We can.
Yep.
All right, this is the existing facility that accesses off of Coleman Road. Our expansion, and I'll jump to the site plan here in just a moment. Our expansion is going to roughly take place in this area here. The buffer that Nick spoke about would be here and here. And so I just wanted to show you that we've got some, at least from Google, with all the leaves on the trees, it looks like a fairly wooded area. We apologize, and we have the landscape architect going out there tomorrow. He will have a landscape plan in time for the Planning Commission meeting with a count and how we're going to address that screening. So then let's go to the site plan. Basically, we're adding 2 buildings. This is 5,300 square feet. This is 5,000 square feet. An area of pavement, associated storm sewer pipes. Here's that screening area that we will address by the Planning Commission. I have been in contact with Karina Newhoff, the Township Engineer, who directed me to Mr. John Morrison at Clinton County Drain Commissioner. And I've had several conversations and emailing plans back and forth. He was able to find the original plans for the original development. We were able to go over the existing drainage calculations and with the overriding concern to protect this westerly property owner from the expansion of this pavement. And that brings us to this existing basin that's been there. It's a retention basin, and it had a existing overflow here that you can see with these contours, the way they're shaped. The basin would rise to a level, it would dribble down, and then it would go north. It never endangered anyone. There's no buildings, it's a farm field. But what we're going to do is, and John is reviewing the plan, and pretty much we came to the same idea. I can only imagine he's going to approve it because he pretty much did over the phone. But we're going to raise up the berm. We're going to create additional storage in the basin. We're going to rehabilitate this basin, which had settled quite a bit on this side. So we're going to bring it back up to snuff, redo the overflow, and that way we'll be handling our own drainage and kind of bringing the basin back to a better state. In fact, this area here really didn't produce that much water. We've had soil borings out here for the buildings, and it's pretty sandy, actually, surprisingly so. So, in saying that, that's the quick and dirty of it. We will have a landscape plan for you for this area here, and we look forward to your comments, questions, and concerns.
Thank you, Brian. That was helpful.
I can give a brief view of the architecture aspect of it.
Great.
It will be 2 climate-controlled storage buildings with key access for the users. There will be a little over 100 units, primarily for use of residential and office kind of clients. And the buildings themselves will match kind of the existing scale of the other existing storage buildings there, and we will use white and red metal roof and wall systems.
Thank you. Okay, Bert and or Nick, anything to add before I go to commissioners?
I can't think of anything, no.
Okay. All right, so let's just open it up for comments and or questions.
Yes, I just have a question, more of a interesting on my own part, is you said it's going to be mostly residential and office storage in here? Because it was interesting to me, there's only 2 doors into each one of these buildings, and they're just regular sized doors. And the spaces are pretty small, 5 by 5 and 10 by 10, with the aisle being 5 feet wide. So it's pretty much, people are gonna have to take stuff in on carts or something. There's no easy way to get at these. You can't back up to it and unload.
Yeah, that's the system that, yeah, so the way that the other buildings operate, those are mostly drive up units. So the unit door is exterior. These will have unit doors on the interior. The owner of this site has other storage facilities in this style. And yes, they provide carts, they provide different, and these are, yeah, residential or office use. So small pieces of furniture, files, that's kind of what they find people choose to store in these units. So yeah, that's typically how they operate.
Thank you.
Stan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Brian. I kind of had I lost the connection here, so I didn't catch the first part of what you were saying, but I caught the end of it. This is increasing impervious surface. Is that correct?
It is.
And did you say that the existing detention pond is sufficient?
It is not.
Okay.
And the reason that it is the westerly bound berm of the basin had settled.
Oh, okay.
So we lost maybe a foot or so of the depth, which the last foot of depth in a basin stores the most water. So I've worked with John Morrison at the drain office, and we're going to raise that berm up. We're going to use some fabric to stake it down and hold it better, and we're going to rehabilitate the overflow.
Thank you.
And he has those plans now, and he's reviewing them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Nick and Bert, I think actually, Nick, you and I had maybe had a discussion about the buffer yard, and maybe there was some question about evergreen versus deciduous trees in that area. Did we get, I mean, have you talked with the applicant about that issue? And I guess I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, before they get the landscape plan to us of what's required there.
Yes, so I have talked with the applicant about this, and you're correct, Dan. We did talk about this. The way that our buffer yard requirements are set up for that particular difference in land use, excuse me, it'd be buffer yard category E, which, depending on the width of the buffer yard, can require anything between 3 evergreens and 5 evergreens, in addition to some deciduous trees and shrubs per 100 feet of property line. So given the fact that there are, at least what we can see from satellite imagery, and we'll have confirmed once the landscape architect does the survey, there do appear to be a significant number of deciduous trees. So what they were discussing, and again, this is the Planning Commission's decision to make, is whether or not there could be any substitution for deciduous trees instead of evergreen trees. Maybe not even in totality, but even a partial substitution, I would think would help.
Okay, great. And Brian, I mean, is that kind of where you're at on this too with the landscaper? Just and that's something you're going to present to us, some possible substitution, deciduous for evergreen?
Yeah, we, speaking with the landscape architect, it'll come down to, does it make any? Are we planting a coniferous tree that will die based on the density of deciduous trees? That'll kind of be what it comes down to. But we don't have any trouble following the ordinance on the landscaping. If it makes some sense to ask for substitutions, we will. But we're not. Our goal isn't to not follow the ordinance. He's going to take pictures as well, so we'll have pictures. We'll present that to you in the we hope you work with us, but we don't have, I don't see any reason we won't be following the ordinance.
Okay, Jason?
We normally ask for tree species in these reports.
So is that for me?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Generally, if there's a landscaping plan, there's going to be new plantings. Generally, they note the tree species. Yep.
I think in terms of what potentially might be a request, I think it would be helpful to know what type of existing trees are there to help inform us on flexibility.
That's what the landscape architect is doing tomorrow. He's visiting the site and we'll inventory all of them, and they'll be located on the plan, and you'll know exactly what they are and where they are.
And it's difficult to tell from the satellite image, but is there no space between the existing deciduous trees and the development where that's going to go? Is there room to squeeze in a coniferous tree that would not sort of be impacted by the deciduous trees that are there?
We cannot tell.
Okay.
We cannot tell. That was kind of an example of where we might ask for substitution if it was just heavily treed already with mature trees. If we planted a pine tree, would it in effect die? But I'm just speculating. We'll see what he comes back with.
Great. Okay. And of course, there is a residence, I guess, to the west, the immediate west there. I guess the concern would be that, we at least provide adequate screening for the part of that parcel, near the dwellings there, near sight lines. So without seeing it, just having stated that I think is going to be pretty important. And you might hear, the public hearings, vary, but we might see some people coming and making that point. So just a heads up that that's a possibility.
Oh, absolutely. Completely agree. We know how important this is, this type of use right next to a residential use. And there's a lot of value in a pine tree over a deciduous tree as far as like 300, 4-season screening. So we understand that.
Absolutely. Good. Planning commissioners, any other questions or comments?
Just a comment on your overflow from your detention area. Now that's still going to flow across your property line onto adjacent property. Is that correct?
It will. That's the historic design of the site. The emergency overflow went in that direction. So the original plans from, forgive me, I'll say, I believe they're prior to 2005. I don't remember what they were, but there was, that was how that was designed originally. We're going to rehabilitate the berm, and we're going to do a little better job making sure the berm stays. Well, we have the benefit of most of the berm already being settled, so we won't have that mass settlement like occurred, but we'll be rehabilitating the berm and the overflow there. The site had historically drained that way, so that's the direction when you design these type of sites that you would point your emergency overflow. It's a historic drainage pattern that you honor during the design process.
Yeah, I think that's good to do that way. I don't know, in some places they require a flowage easement when water drains across somebody else's property. And I don't know if the county drain commissioner requires something like that or not, but maybe a good question to ask. If you need a flowage easement to allow that water to flow across your neighbor's property.
He will let us know. The properties, as long as they're properly mitigated, can flow in their historic direction. So John has not communicated to me that an easement would be needed.
Okay.
Are there other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. So thank you so much, Brian, Mary Kate, for coming. It was really helpful. So it sounds like we're going to see you probably as soon as we can, and as soon as we get some agency feedback. So Nick, you don't want to set that public hearing date until we're farther along getting that external agency reviews. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. All right. We'll see you again.
Yep. Thank you for having us, everyone. Have a good evening.
Yep. You too. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on. Second item under new business is another site plan and special use permit. Again, it's preliminary, but my understanding is that this one's maybe a little further along just because we have some external agency reviews in already. So Nick?
That's correct, yeah. Dan doing a masterful job of taking the words right out of my mouth. So this is an expansion of an existing auto repair facility, excuse me, located along Old M78, but it does have access onto Coleman Road on the south side of the property, and that's why it has the address listed as Coleman Road. The property had a home on it. They demolished it back in sometime during the summer. I think it might have been July or August. So they've done some of the early legwork to get this project moving along. And you'll see one thing I'd like to note on the drawings is that the buildings look like they might be a little bit too close to the property line. I've had a conversation with the applicant about this, and their intention is to do a boundary line adjustment so that that won't be a problem. That will be mitigated, and they can still keep this as two separate parcels. For this, we have Eric Goodnow, who is the owner of the business, and then we also have Kurt Krahulik on the call as well, and he is the engineer from DC Engineering who's been doing the work on it. So any of the three of us, I'm sure, can answer any questions that you all have.
Great. Welcome, Eric and Kurt. So either one of you want to just give us a brief introduction of what you want to do and why you're doing it, how you're doing it?
You want to go ahead, Eric? Give a brief introduction to yourself and what you're planning on doing.
Yeah, wonderful. So yeah, good evening. And yeah, so our design, so he's going to answer a lot of I just wanted to fill you guys in. We're A&D Repair. We've been open and operating a family-owned business since '92. And we're looking to expand this new building would be our new service center garage. The old existing building will continue on as a collision center. We provide both services. So we've gone through and really with a fine-tooth comb with the builder, and site plan and engineering, the outfit so that it fits the area really well. And we're just really excited to add on and be a really good, reputable repair shop for, Bath Township and in the whole surrounding community as a good family-owned business that people have a good trustworthy place to bring their vehicle to. So we've been working real hard to get this done in the last 5 to 10 years. So it's exciting to see that we're almost here. So that's about it. I mean, Kurt's got a lot of the answers. A couple of the things that the boundary line, why we're asking for that adjustment, we anticipate on working out of both garages for many years to come, but you never know. In 30 years, the industry could change, the environment could change where, we might find that one of those buildings could use a better purpose for the township area, and we may want to sell off one building or use it for a different manner. So we feel the property line adjustment is best to have the two parcels, for the township and for investment for us as owners. And then the other thing is the landscape design. I believe our landscape design is done. We also have what types of species plants we would like to put around the new building. We weren't a big fan of the evergreen either. we think we can show a really nice presentation of trees and accent the building and the property. The evergreens grow big and you can't see the building. There's issues driving out onto the highway. One example I could use is like next door to us is Sliding Systems. And, you know, 10, 12 years ago, that building was built and they put evergreens and, you know, 6 of them are 20 foot tall and the one next to it's dead. And then another row of 4 or 5 smaller ones. It doesn't look very appealing. You can't see turning out of the entrance. So my landscaper designed a good species, a good layout, a nice, very presentable looking area for around our shop. And we're mostly, we don't have much residential either side of us. It's all commercial where we're at. So, but I think that's it. I mean, most of the questions, I guess I'd like to go to Kurt if there's any detail as far as the site plan and the building and the layout. So.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Kurt, do you want to say anything before I just open it up for questions?
Yeah, I can point a few things out. If I could get permission to share screen, and I'll throw some things up here.
You should be good to go, Kurt.
So is everybody seeing it now? Or now you should. Everybody seeing the screen now? See Google Earth.
There we go.
We do. Give everybody orientation where we're at. Existing A&D repair facility sits right here. They have purchased this parcel, and as already mentioned, the existing house has been removed. But what they're proposing to do is put a new facility, a new building right in this spot. One of the other things, while I have this screen up, the existing business is currently serviced by a septic system, and it is in need of repair, and the new building does need sanitary service. And what we are looking or requesting the township to approve here is a private service, sanitary service that would collect both the existing buildings and the new buildings. And we would route all those flows down to a private pump station, probably in this corner, still on private property, but then directional drill that force main across M78 along this corridor through an easement from the mobile home park and tap it directly into SCUMA's pump station. SCUMA has conceptually given approval to this, and I think, Nick, you have that from Jonathan, and MDOT has given their approval, though I saw, Nick, you had some questions back to Ghazi on that. But that is what we're looking to do to try to get this commercial business off of a septic field, is to try to get this flow off into this pump station. So that's still in the process. If everything falls through, it'll have to be a septic redesign project. But Eric would really like to get off of that and have some reliable sanitary service. From a site plan viewpoint, here's what we're looking at. The existing facility sits over here. You pick up the eastern 2 buildings in this site plan. There's the proposed building. You're going to have a shared driveway through here that would service both of these. And right now we're proposing a driveway back out to Coleman Road. The road commissioner has provided his comments, and he has some site distance issues with this location, and would like to see this driveway shifted over to the other side of the parcel. I have not made contact back with Mark Trotter up the road commission yet to discuss this. So we'll have to work through that with the road commission and get approval for the driveway out to Coleman. The property line adjustment that we were talking about, the existing property line comes along here and then cuts off at an angle back out to the road. What we'd like to do is a little property line adjustment that sort of bisects the new building and the existing buildings. So it would follow this same line coming up here, head off to the west, and then bisect the two buildings and come out and bisect the driveway. And then there would be a shared access easement written across both properties to be able to utilize that driveway for both parcels. Landscaping wise, on the site plan itself that you see here, we have some landscaping that meets the exact basic letter of your ordinance. You also see submitted with that a landscaping plan by Luke Landscaping that tweaks this a little bit, and is something that Eric and Luke Landscaping like a little bit better than just a basic flat out what we have here. Still meets the intent, we believe, of your performance specs for landscaping. And so we'd like you to consider that alternative landscaping plan is prepared by Luke Landscaping. Stormwater, basically the site flows from the south to the north. We'll be picking up stormwater in a catch basin system along the back, routed around the front to a subsurface detention system. And this will outlet and discharge to the roadside ditch of old M78. MDOT is the approving agency on this, and we have gotten comments back from them. Probably the one thing that we got to work on for that approval is to get a soil boring out there and show to them that we're not into a groundwater situation where we're proposing this system. But I don't see any issues right now with their comments as far as getting that approved. John Morrison will have approval for stormwater, but basically once MDOT approves it, John's pretty much going to go along with their approval. Let's see here. I have anything else? The parcel is going to be serviced by a well, and they're using the well from the existing house, which sits down here in the corner. And Eric, I do believe the health department has already approved the use of that for this new facility. So public or private well systems already in the works for the project here. And I'll open it up and for any questions you may have.
Great, thank you, Kurt. Nick?
Yeah, before we open it up to comments and questions, I just want to provide a little bit of clarification about a couple of things there. So there has been an ongoing conversation about this private sewer connection to that pump station. You know, that, like I said, continues to be a conversation that I'm having with Kurt and also with SCUMA. And for some reason, there seems to be a little bit of miscommunication with MDOT as to who is applying for the permit for the ability to go underneath the road. So I'll be continuing to talk with MDOT and getting that squared away. Because the way the email was worded, it sounded like the MDOT wanted the township to apply for that permit, and that, to be honest, doesn't make much sense to me. And then in regard to the boundary line adjustment, you know, as my planning commissioners know, that's an administrative task that's handled in-house by myself and our assessor, Beth. So that can go on sort of simultaneously as we continue these reviews and get more agency comments in. With that said, you know, if there are questions, I'll try to answer them, and I'm sure Kurt can answer any that I cannot.
Thanks, Nick.
I have something.
Sure, Bert.
For the boundary adjustment, is there enough room to do that boundary adjustment and still maintain the required minimum setbacks?
Based on the concept that I saw, I believe so, but I'll have to look at it again.
Yeah, we still meet all the setback requirements along through there, and then with that shared access easement, you know, would allow both parcels to utilize that space for access.
Okay, are there other questions or comments from Planning Commissioner Stan?
These subsurface detention systems, are they designed for a 100-year flood typically?
Yeah, MDOT, it's designed to MDOT standards because it's going to their facility, and they require you to discharge not more than what was being discharged prior to development. And they make us look at the 10-year, 50-year, and 100-year storm flows. So it is being designed to the 100-year for that purpose. But you also have the smaller year flows as well to try to control some of those smaller storm events, meet the new phase 2 requirements from the state.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
A question for Kurt.
Yeah, hi, Ray.
Hi, Kurt. How are you doing?
Good. How's
2
yourself?
The drainage from your underground storage, is that going to have to be pumped up, or can that go by gravity out to the state system?
I got it going by gravity out to the ditch.
Okay.
That's a fairly deep ditch. At that point, the ground slopes pretty steep itself down to the ditch, but then it's probably a 3-foot deep ditch. Right at the center line. So it drops off quite a bit.
Okay.
Nick, we might not be there yet, but is this a complete packet yet? Or are we waiting? We're waiting on a few things, obviously, but how complete are we?
I would say this is pretty close to complete.
Ready enough to set a date for a public hearing, you think?
I have concerns about the discussion over the sewer system.
Okay.
But aside from that, and perhaps the boundary adjustment being processed, I don't have any glaring concerns. Bert, do you have any, just from what you're seeing there?
I don't. I think the same thing, you know, is that sanitary. You know, obviously we haven't designed anything yet because we want to make sure the township's going to say, yeah, they'll approve the concept before Eric starts spending money to do a design. So I think that's probably the one hurdle that's remaining right now. Now, I did see in the comments from Prine and Newhoff that came in today or yesterday, I forget when, and they mentioned that the township had or either had a master plan or was looking at a master plan for sanitary service extension out here.
That's a pretty, in my experience, that's sort of a generic comment. I know that's been in conversations, but it's my understanding, and Bert, our zoning administrator, can confirm it for me, but I think that's been something that has been said for a while, and I'm not sure that much has happened with it.
All right, so something that's maybe out there, but not really in any kind of solid form. This talk at this point, okay.
Just a comment on
Nick, what else do you think you need from us to get wrapped up before we can get a planning meeting set here?
So Ray, let's handle one more comment, it sounds like, or maybe more. Ray?
Yeah, just a comment on the MDOT concern out there. My experience with MDOT has not been with sewers, but with traffic signals. MDOT does not like to have contracts with private entities. They want to have it with a governmental agency. And I know in Meridian Township, there was a place out there around the mall that had a traffic signal that was paid for by the mall, but the contract was with the township. Every time we got a bill, we'd send it to the mall to pay. I suspect MDOT's concern is maintenance of that directional drill sewer once it's under the road. If something goes wrong with it, who's going to be responsible for that? And they'd rather have, my experience, they'd rather have the township be responsible than a private entity. That may be what their concern is.
Could be. We'll find out from Ghazi.
I'm intending to hopefully have a phone conversation with Ghazi tomorrow and get that cleared up. But yeah. Ray, I appreciate that information. That's not something that I was aware of.
Yeah. The other question I had is not really related to that. It looks like there's a large antenna on the property that's going to be taken down. Is that correct?
Actually, no. Eric, you want to address your antenna?
Yeah, absolutely. So the antenna on site, that used to be an old radio ECI cable company. So the amount of square footage that the property takes up for the antenna, we would like to leave it there. We're trying to land a contract actually right now with Board and Water and Light for wireless readings for their meters. And Consumers is actually looking at it as well. So we find that it would remain on site for the technology, the technical side of technology, having that available for future. So at the end of the day, we'd like to just leave it. The only thing back there would be parking. It would not be customer parking. It'd be customers' vehicles get parked back there from the employees, like a service lot. It's not a deal breaker. If I can't build my building and that antenna's got to come down, guess what? It's coming down. So, but I think with the way the world's running and technology, there could be some use for that in the future. And I'd like to keep it as an option.
Hey, yeah, the one that shows on that right next to your building, it looked to me like when I was looking at the plans, it looked like there used to be maybe a large antenna further south on the property, closer to Coleman Road. It showed support wires or something, and maybe I was reading the plan wrong. I don't know, but
no, the antenna was always immediately to the west of the house.
Okay.
In a little parking lot on the south side of the house. And I think, was there a gazebo or something off in the other corner, Eric? I forget what the historic stuff showed, but.
So I think what he's referencing, so out back there was 12 satellite dishes.
Oh, yes.
Maybe he's inquiring on some of those from the old satellite views. There used to be like, I don't know, 6, 10, 12 big satellite dishes. Those were purchased from somebody up north that needed communications with cable. They were removed off site. And when Mint City Excavation removed the house, there was some large pillars on the east side of the brick house. There was another antenna there years ago, but the last 20 years, I don't ever remember seeing it. So it had to have been taken down much long time ago. So the only antenna remaining is the large, I believe it's about 170 feet tall, the main antenna.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look at the plans again. Just looked to me like there were 2 antennas on the site, but I think it's probably that old one that maybe still shows in the plan somewhere.
Maybe it might, but everything is removed other than the large one. That's all that remains.
Yeah.
So
I didn't have any concern with that one. I just thought there were 2.
Yeah. And obviously we can't remove that without a permit anyway. We need a crane and all that good stuff. So, so we left it. We had permission to demolition the house, obviously, from the township. So we did that already. So.
Ray, you have any more questions?
Nope.
Okay. So I'd prefer actually to set a date for a public hearing. I think obviously we have to have the sanitary situation figured out before approval. And hopefully we have that figured out before the public hearing as well. There's no guarantee, as we know, that we're going to vote on this at the time of the public hearing, but having a complete packet and have that issue resolved would go a long ways towards that end. So Nick, what's the next available date that we have for setting this public hearing?
Given the fact that this is a use requiring a special use permit, I do have to send out 300-foot notices to adjacent properties. State law slightly inconveniently requires 15 days, which kind of throws off a 2-week cycle, but that's okay. So the next available date would be Tuesday, March 9th.
Okay. If there's no objections, I propose that we set the date for the public hearing then. Okay, good. Any final comments, questions? But Eric, Kurt, thanks for being with us tonight, answering questions.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on. We are under new business still, item C, which is Planning Commission appointments. So this is just to make sure that we are all sort of aware of the complexity, or I guess the difficulty of some of the appointments that have been or have not been made on this body and the rest of the township. So just to bring everyone up to speed, as you all know, Jason was appointed to the Board of Trustees while he was serving on the Planning Commission. The Michigan Planning Enabling Act is pretty clear that seems to be there's a problem with having both the trustee representative, who is Ryan at this point, and another trustee serving on the Planning Commission. While there's some ambiguity in the sense that they make a distinction between elected official and saying nothing about appointed, interpretation by the township attorney suggests that Jason would be considered an elected official, even though technically he was appointed to the trustee position. So I proposed to the Board of Trustees that, and sorry, Jason has given me his letter of resignation from the Planning Commission. And I think, Jason, you can jump in here, but I think we both agree, Jason and I, that in the long term, it's a bad idea to have two trustees on the Planning Commission. Yes. So I proposed to the Board of Trustees that his resignation become effective immediately upon the Board of Trustees appointing his replacement. So really the ball is in their court. If that happens in 2 weeks, it happens in 2 weeks. If it happens in a month, it happens in a month. So I did that mainly because I'm concerned about the functioning of the Planning Commission. I would like to have a full slate of commissioners to go through the various things that we're going through. And of course, as you all know, Jason has also been instrumental, along with Nick, in working on this broadband issue. So that's kind of where I am at. I wanted to make sure that I was clear with all of you, kind of what I suggested. And obviously I respect all of your opinions greatly. So if you've got any profound disagreement with that plan, with that proposal, I'd like to hear it. But that's what I had suggested. Nick, I know that you wanted to raise your hand there. You want to add something?
Yeah, so I agree with everything you just said. I don't necessarily think that there is, from the language of the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, I don't think there necessarily is anything in there that says having two trustees on the Planning Commission is not allowed. This is a conversation that I had with Supervisor Howe last week. You know, like you said, I think long-term, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but until we have a replacement, I know you and I are in agreement that we would rather not have an empty seat. We dealt with that enough back in the fall, and it did get close to causing some issues. So having a full slate for as long as reasonably possible, even if that means having Jason on as a holdover, if you will, I think makes sense.
Yeah, John?
Where do we stand with Mr. George Baker? Yeah, he's a carryover right now.
Yeah, so I believe he is a carryover. So yeah, Nick, did you have something to add?
Oh, I was going to say he is a carryover. I don't have any update about whether or not he's going to be requesting reappointment or not. There's, that's solely in the board's hands at this point, and I can't speak for them.
I did speak to George a week ago or so, and he does have an application in for reappointment to the Planning Commission. Obviously nothing's been done, I think, with that application, but he said that it's there. Stan?
Yeah, can one of the trustees or anyone else shed light on why there's a delay in the appointments?
It's a great question. Elephant in the room. Who wants to take that?
Should I withdraw my question?
No, maybe it's difficult to explain. Maybe.
Yeah, it's hard to explain because I don't know that Jason and I fully understand where the delay is coming from. I think the best way to describe it is there's a fundamental disagreement in the philosophy and approach of appointing committee members in the township between the supervisor and the rest of the board. things like, should board members sit on committees? Should individuals sit on multiple committees? Should people be reappointed? Those are the types of topics that we've been discussing at the board level. And for the most part, it seems like there's a group of folks that agree that we've been doing well in the township for the last several decades in the way that we've been doing it. The supervisor disagrees. And so there are some committees like the Planning Commission that the board is not able to appoint to without a recommendation from the supervisor. So she recommends and we vote yes or no. Other committees, such as the road committee, for example, she can recommend, or other board members can recommend and vote up and down. So because it does have to come through the supervisor, we can only respond to what she puts forward.
Well, that explains it. Thank you very much.
John? Sorry.
Support your
Ray,
position.
I missed. Yeah, go ahead, John, and then Ray.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to support your position, Dan. I think it's essential that Jason remain on the Planning Commission, especially considering that we've got George's seat also in limbo here. And Jason's been a real critical player in the internet committee. So I think it's important that he remain.
Okay, thanks, John. Ray?
Yep. No, I concur with what John just said about Jason's position. I think we ought to not have any vacancies. I watched the board meeting last Monday, and it seemed to me I was a little confused by any what you just said, Ryan, as far as the Marie Howe appointing or making appointments on the Planning Commission. Would it be allowed for trustees to make recommendations to the supervisor on who could be appointed to the Planning Commission? Because I kind of get the impression at that meeting that was not what was happening.
Yes, but it would be an informal sense. So any trustee could recommend to the supervisor that she formally recommend to the board somebody, but it has to be introduced and formally recommended by her. From my discussions from other board members, I think George is well respected, and if we had our druthers, we would reappoint him today, but we just don't have the authority to do so until and unless the supervisor nominates him herself.
Okay. I think one of the problems with George might be, my understanding is the supervisor would prefer not to have one person be on only one committee, not on more than one. And George is on the road committee, I'm pretty sure. That may be the sticking point. I don't know.
I think it is a sticking point. I'm not sure that it is the sticking point.
Nick?
Yeah, so I think Ryan put that really well, but just to clarify, both the State Planning Enabling Act and our own zoning ordinance discussing Planning Commission does explicitly state that the township supervisor has to be the person who formally recommends it. So I'm glad that Ryan put that really well by clarifying that, you know, the other members of the Board of Trustees can essentially recommend somebody to Supervisor Howe, but Supervisor Howe has to be the person who can, who makes that formal recommendation. And I guess just to piggyback off of that, and I apologize to Jason and Ryan in advance, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious because I haven't heard much about this, about the Zoning Board of Appeals, because that is an instance, at least from my understanding, where individual board members can recommend members to be appointed to that. And so I was just curious if that was something that was going to be addressed sooner rather than later, or if maybe I'm misinterpreting things.
It's on our radar is how I would describe that. We've got about 40-ish openings across the township in our committees right now. And we're trying to eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Okay, yeah, maybe we can talk about that offline in the next couple of days.
I'd really encourage members of this committee, if you think George or anyone else would make good Planning Commission members, or the person that Supervisor Howe has recommended, to share your thoughts with certainly the supervisor, but the board in its entirety.
Thank you. Okay, just one thing to add too. There was a little talk, and not among us, but I think among I don't know where it came from actually. I'm just gonna. There's a suggestion that we ought to rethink sort of voting rights for the trustees. So we've never done that in the past, obviously, right? So trustees, they're ex officio members, but that does not mean that they don't have voting rights. And I see no reason to curtail or change any of what we've traditionally done in terms of allowing trustees, whether that's Jason, who's a trustee but not the representative, or Ryan, of course, to continue to fully participate in all of our meetings, including having voting rights. But I just wanted to make my position clear on that too, and to see if you had any comment on that. Nick?
I agree with you completely. And to anyone who opposes the idea of a trustee being on the planning commission having a voting right, I would like to ask you how we would break a tie.
Well, there's the practical issue, but then I don't even think there's any legislative grounding for that position. I don't think there's anything in the bylaws that I'm aware of, or policy or ordinance, that suggests that trustees can't vote on the planning commission.
I agree with you completely.
Okay.
Stan? I think you're right, Dan. The only exception is that they can't be the chair or the vice chair.
That's correct.
But there is nothing that I'm aware of that restricts their vote. And plus, one of the major functions that they're performing is to vote. If they don't have the vote, then what exactly is their role? I mean, they're just making comments like public would make comments. And it doesn't have any bearing on the fact that they're on the board.
Good. Okay. It sounds like we are in agreement then. Just wanted to make sure and to see if anybody had any concerns about how I see this body moving forward. Again, it's in the Board of Trustees' hand. Jason, I think, stays with us until an appointment is made to replace him. Okay, let's move on. So the fourth item under new business is this planning commissioner responsibilities. So I've been working on a document that lays out sort of what the planning commission is, its responsibilities, and member responsibilities as well. I did send that out earlier in the week. I got responses from a couple people, but I just wanted to make sure, give everyone an opportunity to comment here also. And I'll take all those comments, including the ones that I received previously, and work those up and then send out the new draft in a couple of days. But any additional comments to that draft that went out, Jason?
So the audience for this document will be new planning commission members, right?
Yes.
So I'd sent an email with some words.
Or potentially applicants too, sorry. Applicants as well, yeah.
So I think a couple things. One is maybe you have a description of the planning commission, but a description of the qualifications for potential planning commission members. And that doesn't have to be technical classifications or skills, but more, one, they're a registered voter in the local municipality. And two, we're seeking people who represent a broad range of disciplines, industries, and the like. And I know the Planning and Enabling Act has a section that has some language related to that.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay. Ray?
All right, just one comment on the education. It says per our bylaws, we're required to seek a minimum of 4 hours of continuing education, which is, I looked at the bylaws, that's exactly what it says. Should that say annually or just one time enough?
It should say annually, yep. Does the bylaws does not say annually?
What's that?
Is that right?
No.
The bylaws don't say annually?
No.
Huh. I always took it to mean per year.
That's kind of what I thought too. And speaking of the bylaws, when I read those, the bylaws still say we're meeting at 7 o'clock instead of 6. Maybe we should look at that.
Well, nothing really gets done until 7 anyway, so, right? So I don't know what to do about the annual. I guess I don't want to change language if the bylaws isn't explicit about what that is. I did take out the reference to the bylaws and just said members are required to seek a minimum of 4 hours. So it maybe wouldn't be a problem if I, well, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I don't want to jump ahead of the bylaws. That's something that we could change, but maybe I should leave it as it is somewhat ambiguous, I guess, until those bylaws.
What if we took out the bylaws reference and just say that recommended to receive a minimum of 4 hours annually? The bylaw is still going to say you have to do it once, but.
You mean change the document that I have in front of me instead of doing anything with the bylaws? Yeah, right. I could do that. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Other comments?
Yeah, I have one.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Hambert.
That's okay. I have a terrible internet signal, or I would have already pulled up the Enabling Act and read it. So I can't read it and come and be certain, but pretty sure there's language in the Enabling Act that deals with continuing education for Planning Commission members anyway.
Okay.
So maybe Nick can find that and send it out to you.
Okay, I have a copy of that too. I can dig out. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I didn't want to really overwhelm. I mean, there's a lot of links here, you know, for continuing education and other kind of legal information. But you know, I think the idea is to keep this kind of brief, but really as a go-to source, quick go-to source for various things. So we're under 2 pages. I think that's good. I wouldn't want to make it much longer than this.
I think it's a very helpful document.
Good. Okay. So once we get this done, I'll send out the newer draft as soon as I have these changes made, and then we'll hand it over to Taylor. I don't know if Taylor's going to be ready to sort of, I don't know if she's starting to look at all township documents and make them all look prettier, but this could be one that she adds to her list when she eventually gets there.
Yeah, I'm working towards kind of getting everyone to send me their communications that would go external anyways. So that would be a great start.
Okay, great. Nick?
I found the language that Bert was referencing. It states that a planning commission may adopt bylaws relative to compensation and expenses of its members and employees for travel when engaged in the performance of activities authorized by the township board, including attendance at conferences, workshops, educational and training programs and meetings. I simply did a search for the word education. I didn't see anything about it requiring education, but sort of the implication there is that the bylaws can have language requiring education and providing, you know, compensation to pay for that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, I think looks like we've wrapped this up. So let's move on. We have one item added under new business, and that's the election of officers for the Planning Commission. So we almost got there last time. I think we did have, I indicated that I'd be willing to stand for chair, and John indicated he'd be willing to stand for vice chair. That's where it is. So I'm just gonna hand it to the Planning Commission. And what do you want to do at this point?
I move to reappoint Dan as the chair and John as the vice chair and continue their good work.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Ryan. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same sign? Okay, and that is done. Thanks, everyone. So let's then go back to old business. So we've got 2 items there. Comprehensive plan implementation. So Nick gave us some really helpful documentation in the packet. Nick, do you want to talk us through what you had in mind?
Sure. So the first couple of pages provided there, that's the language that was in the draft that was left over from my predecessor. I think it does a pretty decent job of explaining that really the comprehensive plan is sort of the predecessor to the zoning ordinance. And the zoning ordinance is how we enact the comprehensive plan in part. I think there's potential for fleshing this out a little bit. I think there possibly could be some discussions just about township activities in general that try to fulfill comprehensive plan goals or objectives. And then I provided an example that I really liked. This is from the village of Paw Paw. Not only do I like the design of it, but I really liked, first off, they have this small table that talks about their future evaluation factors for land use. I thought that was helpful, but the thing that I really liked, and I've seen this in other comp plans, but I just liked this plan in general, so I took it out of here. The implementation matrix that they provided essentially explains what the action would be. That would be pulling that out of the goals section. Remember our hierarchy of goal, objective, action. So it would be taking those specific actions out of here, clarifying whose responsibility that is, what the intended time frame is, and then coming up with a priority in terms of 1 being the highest priority, 2 being a bit lower, and then 3 being the lowest priority. So I personally really like the way that this is structured. I like the logic of it, but I'd like to hear everyone's opinions on this. And obviously when we go to fill this out with our actions, should we take this route, that would be, sort of a discussion during a meeting about what the, whose responsibility each action would be and what the priority is.
Right, and your document, Nick, that you had sent out to everyone, I believe, your suggestions for rewriting the goals, objectives, and action items. You included action items, which is, I think, a good addition. I mean, some of those were how we had framed objectives, I think, but then the idea would be to take all those action items, populate this matrix, and then, as you said, assign responsibility and prioritize them, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's the gist of, of what we're going for.
So one thing that I got a question. I don't know if there's more supporting documentation for this matrix, but so priority is obviously not just a time priority. There's something else working there. So you have some that they would like to see. I think I'm seeing, or maybe I'm not. Within a year, some things that are stated. Oh, maybe that's just the tracking. Okay. I was just confused that tracking was within the year, but some of those were given a 3 on priority, whereas some were given a span of 5 years, but priorities were 1. Are we duplicating this idea of, okay, let me ask that another way. Is priority considered just a time priority?
No, so I do see an example of what you're talking about. It appears that most of the top ranked priorities, or the ones, are listed generally as being within a year, some of those being 1 to 5 years. I think the timing is more about how long it's going to take to fulfill that action. So for example, there is one example that says educate property owners about property maintenance. Again, this is an example from their matrix, not ours, but it says timing is within 1 year, but it has the priority listed as a 3. So I think just based on that, there can be some assumptions made that perhaps this is a community that doesn't have many issues with property maintenance. It doesn't have that many code violations, but it's something that to keep the citizens educated wouldn't take that much time, or wouldn't be that difficult, but there are more pressing issues. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So that's sort of how I'm interpreting that. The timing is really about how long it's going to take, and the priority is about how important it is to the community.
Nick, you're pretty much spot on there. I actually developed the property maintenance code program in 1992 in the village of Paw Paw. And that's been going an ongoing program there since. And so actually they've done a pretty good job of maintaining their buildings. So what they are lacking, however, is the education part for the people that live there. So you're right on the money on that one. Rebecca Harvey is the planner in the village of Paw Paw, and she's the one that put that together. And actually, she teaches planning at Western Michigan University. and her students actually did a study in the village, and the resulting master plan came from that study.
Second question about the matrix. So the responsibility there, I can definitely see how staff and planning commission may have different responsibilities for each of these action items. I'm a little bit more puzzled in some sense of where our board of trustees, or I guess in their case, the village council comes in. I mean, ultimately, a lot of the approval is going to, rest at their hands. But do you think, Nick, any of our current action items we can sort of reasonably give responsibility to the board of trustees in implementing?
Well, for one thing, I think that might be a slightly difficult question to ask, given the next topic is the goals. But the way that I'm looking at this, at least right now, is the fact that given the board of trustees controls the purse strings, if any of these actions require spending, that would probably be one of the main ways that the board of trustees would be involved. Another would be if it's something that does explicitly either through our charter or our ordinances or state law require us to get permission from the legislative body of the township. But that is good food for thought.
I mean, other than site plans, everything, we're advisory to the board, I think, for every issue that comes before us, right? So it's, they would, yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Just to point out, their village council is listed as on every action item.
Okay,
so,
yeah,
I mean, it's an inclusive statement, not an exclusive statement.
Okay, yeah, so
it would
maybe be unhelpful in some sense, right? I mean, it's everywhere. It's in every. So I don't know.
Also included.
What's that?
They wanted them to feel included and not left out, like accidentally forgetting to include a goal about the capital improvements plan.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess I have no real objections. That's fine. I mean, if we're kind of counting who are the players here for each of these items, it maybe makes sense. And then they did include what they don't have a little key for, DDA and various other bodies, depending on the action item. So I suppose we would be there as well, depending on the issue. I like this, Nick. So, I guess depending on how our discussion of goals, objectives, and action items goes, this could be something that we could do too.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to do. I think it puts it into a very usable table that we can easily look at a particular action. Once we've gotten to this point and filled it out, and we can say, okay, we decided this is a high priority and it's going to take less than a year, so let's get started on it. Or it's a low priority, so maybe other things come before it.
Yep. Okay. Other comments on this? Suggestions for Nick? We probably don't have too many suggestions since we still have to populate it, but. Okay. Okay, so then let's go to the second item under old business, which is the goals and objectives. So I'll let you kick us off, Nick.
Okay. So I guess before we really open this up, I just want to reiterate, and I know I'd sent this out in an email just for everyone to look at. This was sort of something I took on as a side project while I was in Pennsylvania. I had a lot of free time to use. And so, I looked at the draft goals and the language that was included before that. Again, that's all from the draft that was left by Brian. And I wasn't a huge fan of the structure of it. But I also think that there are a lot of times when these actions are going to overlap particular categories. So for example, there are going to be some goals that fit both, say, transportation and land use, or environment and land use. And so having a goal that is sort of portioned off for each of those quote unquote categories of planning, as I look at it, maybe doesn't make the most sense. And so the way that I had restructured that And I think this is probably where the first sort of contentious conversation might come up is, I tried to think about, what are the hot button main issues that we're facing as a township, as it relates, primarily to planning, but also to other relevant topics. And so, what I came up with is that set of, 8 particular issues, and obviously very open to that conversation. But, identified those 8 issues, tried to develop a goal that was broad yet clear about what we're focusing on, and then narrowing it down with the objective, and then having the action be a very specific item that we would engage in to work towards fulfilling those objectives as a part of that goal. So I don't know if maybe we want to talk about those 8 identified issues first, or if we just want to open it up as a whole.
Yeah, we could. I want to just summarize my feedback to you, Nick, too. So I didn't do this. I didn't respond by email just because of the Open Meetings Act.
Right.
So I told Nick that I like these ideas of how to restructure our current draft. So this kind of hierarchical setup of goals, objectives, and actions. And I was generally in agreement with supportive of the goals, how he kind of reframed them. The problem that I pointed out, and Nick was quick to say, yep, we can fix that, is just that, there's lots of things added, which we had not talked about yet in terms of action items, especially. And then some things deleted from our current list of what I think are objectives. And so I think, if Nick, you were to kind of go back and put back in, I guess, some of those objectives that we did have in the current draft as action items, and then maybe highlight those things that you've added that we hadn't talked about, I think that would go a long way sort of towards bringing these two documents together.
Right. Yep. And from having looked through that, the main 2 things I noticed is, hence my joke about the CIP, that had been kind of slipped out. I thought that was sort of a no-brainer, but happy to put that back in there, to cover any concerns there. And then the other one that I noticed was, a goal that had, or excuse me, not a goal, I think it was a policy about looking at adopting a low impact development ordinance. And so, that's another one I'm happy to add. So if we go through there and anybody finds any others that are missing, happy to have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, your point, I think, is well taken, this idea that it was a no-brainer. It is a no-brainer, but I think that does raise the question of, how many of those things we need to continue to put in here. Like, you have in there continue to support bath days, which I would say is an important part of Bath, but it also kind of is a no-brainer. So, why does that get thrown in when the CIP process gets thrown out? So I think we just have to be consistent. If we just want to make sure that these things that we do regularly are in there, we should do that and not sort of prioritize or call out any of these routine things more than others. Jason?
So the question I had, relates to the original objective, goal 1 area, which were a set of tools and processes that the Planning Commission employs to implement or live into the comprehensive plan. And I did wonder the extent to which that doesn't really fit as a goal area, as opposed to this is how we implement the work of the comprehensive plan. And I think that relates back to the CIP process, as well as zoning ordinance and some of the other language that we had.
That's a good observation, Jason. I wonder if, kind of piggybacking off of that, some of these couldn't be identified as that draft text that I had provided for the implementation section before we get to that table. If we couldn't work some of the language from this, call it old goal 1, into that implementation language.
I like that suggestion. Yeah. So the idea would you pull out some of these things, as Jason said, these things that are really the tools of the planning, how we do these various action items. I like that. I mean, my own feeling with the action item is that if I read that action item, I should have a very clear idea when the time comes what work I need to do. And if it's ambiguous, then it can't be an action item or too broad. Like developing a low impact ordinance is pretty clear, right? We know exactly what's intended there and we can do it. There's some other action items that I thought in your draft, Nick, and just a couple I thought that were still quite ambiguous, and I wouldn't know how to start. It would involve having a big discussion about what's meant by the action items before we ever get around to figuring out what it is we're going to do. And I think I flagged those, a couple of examples of those in my comments to you.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, I guess I really, would like to go back to those sort of identified key issues that I pointed out. I feel like there's maybe one or two of those that might be a little touchy, but in general, I from my own observations in the time I've been here, I feel like that's pretty accurate. But if people have things that they'd like to see added or they have things they'd like to see removed, I'd like to hear that. Because if we want to keep the comp plan moving along at a semi-reasonable pace, then, this is the time to do that. And if there are questions about what any of those identified issues mean, I'm happy to clarify that as well.
Bert, I don't know if I... Yeah.
Sorry,
Bert?
Moved back over to my PDF and it looked like Bert was talking, but he's not. Okay.
So I like that these issues are generally framed as not necessarily problems, but sort of challenges, except for that first one. It's almost like it might be true, but maybe we can frame that kind of in the way that we framed the other ones in terms of, ongoing challenges, to maintain identity or to establish identity. I don't know if we're ready to say we lack a cohesive identity. It seems too strong to me. I'm nitpicking somewhat, I think, but the other ones, yeah.
That's what I was getting at without saying it. I think we have a part of the township that is pretty well developed. It's very clear that that's sort of that southern third to quarter of the township. And then on the complete opposite end, we have, sort of that northern section of the township that is still very rural. And so, I think at first glance sounds more negative than it's meant to. Reading that goal the way it's worded, the issue identified is, as it says, lack of cohesive identity. But the way the goal is articulated is, trying to talk about context-sensitive decisions that, strengthen our sense of community. We have to make sure that there are the rural parts of the township that feel like they're being protected, but also recognized and appreciated for what they are. But then also acknowledging that Bath Township is experiencing pressures for growth, and that we're not shutting that out by any means. So, like I said, I think at first glance it sounds maybe worse than it's intended to.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, Jason, go ahead.
Just in terms of sensitivity of how we talk about the various parts. I mean, as a Northerner in our community, I would fully say that we are fully developed and we don't need the pandering of the Southerners to help us with our identity. I think we would say it's the Southern tier that lacks the identity of Bath. So I would just be a little bit careful how you talk about us.
No, you're making this fun, Jason.
Trying to help.
Ray.
Yeah, I think Bath's identity, I think what Jason just brought up is a good question. Saying the south part needs the identity. I think what we need to decide is, what do we want Bath's identity to be? Because when we talk to people outside the township, where do you live? Bath Township. Oh, that's too bad. And then you say, well, I live in Hawk Hollow, or I live in a development in the southwest part of the town, southeast part of the township. Oh, that's okay. But to me, the overall impression of somebody says Bath Township, that's not necessarily a good thing. In fact, some people think, well, Bath Township schools aren't all great. I'm not sure that's true. I don't know anything about the schools, but I think the schools are probably fine. But I think somehow we've got to work on Bath's identity and what we want. When people think of Bath, what do we want them to think about? And I think one of the concerns I've got right now is you think about Bath, what do you think about? Downtown doesn't have, Bath doesn't have a downtown. And I know at the meeting, at the trustees meeting Monday, they talked about Webster Road. And I'm not sure that they understand what my concerns were about Webster Road. That if the county is going to rebuild Webster Road, and they are, that's good. But can they do it in a way that's going to help us make Webster Road what we want it to be in 15 or 20 years? I don't know if the trustees really understand that concept yet.
And you've been working on that for a long time, Ray. You've been consistent in that message. I entirely agree with you. Jason.
Again, in a more serious tone, I do want to reiterate the fact that, there are multiple identities in Bath. And while the folks that you talk to talk about, about the northern part of Bath, I mean, there are other folks that I talk to who talk about, well, those folks from the university or whatever, the transplants that, are ruining the culture of Bath. I mean, I think we need to find a position where we recognize both, and we may not have a uniform single identity, but our identity is multitudinal. And maybe that's where we need to find and recognize the strengths of both sides or the multiple sides of within this document.
I do think that then I think that we can still reword that a little bit. I'm not sure. I don't have any language for you, but I'm not sure what it is, but I think we can do that.
I have an idea already.
Okay. I did want to ask though, what is the housing jobs balance?
So we have a very, again, not to sound dismissive, we have a lot more housing than we do business. And, part of my job description is to focus on some economic development, bringing some more business and strengthening businesses that we already have here. And obviously we can have a whole separate conversation about economic development, and I'm sure that we will, and I hope we do. But this, again, sort of touching on the same thing might be a little touchy, but, we are largely a bedroom community for Meridian Township, East Lansing, and the data backs that up. I'm happy to provide a map, assuming it still works based on the census website overhaul, but shows commuters in, commuters out, and the number of people that for work live and work in Bath Township. And you will find that the majority of people commute out of Bath Township to work. So, okay. If we want to sort of find that balance, then that involves keeping people living and working in Bath.
Yeah. So, I mean, the solution is not to restrict housing, obviously, right? It's to encourage local businesses. So, I mean, maybe that's a clear statement of what you intend there. And I totally agree with you, is just to encourage the creation or maintenance of local businesses. Isn't that one way to say that without sort of a more ambiguous kind of title like you have it? Because
it's, if someone's looking at the description of that, the identified key issue, and I apologize, this can sound slightly insensitive, and getting offended by that, I'm not entirely sure what to do, because there's more.
I'm not talking about taking offense. I'm just doing it for clarity, right? And so, I had the question, what does that mean? And I think a lot of people might have a question about what that means exactly. You explained it quite well. But to me, what you said is basically, let's try to encourage local business development.
Right. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, and I didn't mean that to be targeted at you in general.
No, I know.
So yeah, I can think about how to rephrase that to flesh that out.
John, you had your hand up?
Yes, I'd like to make a couple of comments. Ray, you said about the Webster Road corridor, that county was implicit that they would only do a mill and fill on Webster Road unless the township came up with some money and a plan to do otherwise to Webster Road. So the ball is really in our court to come up with a plan and discuss it with them. And they have the engineering capabilities of doing some really great road work. If you've driven the piece of Coleman Road between West Road and Wood Road, they were the engineers and the oversight of the construction of that piece of road. And I think they did a really tremendous job with that. And they could make Webster Road a gateway to Bath. And it's important, I think, that we do it before we pursue an interchange at Chandler and 69, because that's going to really change the game a lot if Bath doesn't make Webster Road the entrance to the Bath community. The other thing that Bath has to face is we're in 2 different postal zones. In fact, I think we actually have 3 postal zones. We have Bath, Hazlet, and East Lansing, and we're also in 3 different school districts. We're in East Lansing, Hazlet, and Bath. And a lot of people kind of relate to where their children go to school and not necessarily to the community they live in. And I don't know how we'd ever overcome that issue.
I agree. We need to have more business in Bath Township. The question is, where should it go? I think that's one of the big questions is, where do we want the business in Bath to be located? Should it be on Webster Road? Should it be on Chandler Road? Or should it be someplace else? That's the key question in my mind. I mean, we have a sign that says downtown Bath. Yeah, I don't know if anybody ever looks at that sign and tries to find out where is downtown Bath. And when I first moved to Bath, that's the first thing I did. Okay, downtown Bath, where is it? And I couldn't find it, even though the sign says it's down there.
That's a very legitimate concern, Ray. And I think the Planning Commission over the last couple of years has kind of identified 2 corridors where we'd like to see commercial development. One is the old M78 Military Road area where the Myers is and Monticello's and some of those businesses. And the other is the piece of Webster Road between Drumhiller and the freeway.
I think that the objectives and actions under the goal 2, which talks about that, those priority growth areas, touches on that pretty well, talking about Webster Road, as well as the Bath Village Plan. An action could be added about the old M78 area as well.
Dan?
Just to touch on that issue and answer Ray's question. One thing we've got to start thinking more about and realizing is just being in commercial real estate is, we as planning commissioners can desire all we want to where the businesses should be, but it is usually the market that determines that. And so, like Nick pointed out, we're a bedroom community and people go out of Bath to other places. And so one way to identify that is to say, well, study the traffic patterns and see, well, which are the main arterials by which people are going to work and coming back, the morning commute and the evening commute. And those end up determining where businesses will be. So it's not it's not ours really to determine where they will be, where they ought to be. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, the other concern I think with Bath is do people really know where Bath is? Like the Myers, how many people know that's in Bath? And that whole area down behind McDonald's, that that's all Bath there? Or is that really the north part of Meridian Township? And coming down Chandler Road is a great big sign just north of Eagle Eye that says, "Welcome to East Lansing." I mean, do people know? Yeah, okay, that's East Lansing on the right, but on the west is all Bath Township. On the east, I mean, it's all Bath Township. So I think we have.
We do a pretty good job with signs, I think. So if you drive north on Marsh, you can see our sign.
Yeah.
If you drive north on, is that Newton?
Yeah.
You see the sign again. So, I mean, hopefully those signs do convey the message in the long term.
And I think that issue is, again, part of probably Nick's identity issue that we ought to consider, right? It's part of identity, a clear identity.
One specific comment, Nick, on Objective 1, Action 2, I agree with that. I think we ought to stick annual in there.
That's a point that Dan pointed out as well. It was just a word missing, but thank you. Yeah, I agree. That's something that should be done annually. And for some reason, it's even coming to mind that it might be spelled out as a suggestion in the Planning Enabling Act, but I could be remembering that wrong.
All right. Are there other comments? So Nick, can you bring this back to us with that sort of mocked up document of putting stuff back in that was in, and then just highlighting those things that you've added? Good suggestions, I thought, that we should spend just a little bit of time talking about.
Yeah, that's not a problem. You know, if anyone has other comments that they, would rather have in writing, please just shoot me an email.
Jason?
Is it possible to get these documents in Word format so we could do editing within the document or suggested edits within the document?
I can email you all a Word document. Yeah, you can do track changes and make comments.
Yeah, and I don't know if the township is using Google Docs or some kind of shared site, so you don't have to do a lot of revision of one person's revisions and then the next. We could all sort of do the revisions collectively together. I'm not sure if you have the capability, or if maybe they don't like that either. I don't know.
I personally don't have an issue with that.
Yeah.
So that's an option as well.
Okay. I mean, for this kind of exercise, we probably don't get that too often, but it would be really helpful in this case.
Yeah, and just I want to add one thing that I had talked with Jason about briefly earlier today, just the idea of when we do get to the point where we're comfortable with all of the content, creating sort of a group of myself and maybe 1 to 3 of you who really want to nitpick the bejesus out of the wording, move sentences around, note missing commas, those types of grammatical issues is something I think is productive rather than it turning into sort of a piecemeal thing. But if we're looking still at content, then I think getting feedback from all of you makes perfect sense.
Yeah, agreed. And when that comes, maybe a Google Doc, that would be even more helpful then, so we all have access to editing.
Right.
Or whoever wants to. Okay, so let's move on, I guess. So we are on 9, report from a planner. Here's your chance, Nick.
Let's see here. Let me scroll back up. Okay, we already did that. Okay. So as you all know, we've continued to have conversations, myself, Jason, and Dan, about the internet subcommittee. Had a call on Monday with SpartanNet. They provided some great information and are very interested in possibly working with the township. Don't want to put the cart before the horse here. So of course, this outcome with the subcommittee will be looking at all of the possible solutions, whether that be, do nothing, municipal internet service provider, some sort of public-private partnership, all of those different options to make sure that we've spelled all those out to the Board of Trustees and then providing a recommendation based on that. The two gentlemen that I talked to from SpartanNet are willing to talk at our special meeting, just sort of explaining the possible benefits of public-private partnership, or you know, just the overall benefits about possibly expanding internet options in the township. So, you know, was very excited to hear that. Let's see here. So that was Monday. Just gonna flip back to last week and make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh yes, and on Friday, myself, Dan, and Jason, we had a Zoom call with a couple of folks from Linden Township down by Ann Arbor. They talked about their experience of going from literally no internet access options other than using a hotspot on your cell phone to essentially installing fiber for the entire community and having a private entity manage that in a co-op type of situation. So that was very interesting as well. I'm not sure if either of you want to go into more in-depth than that, but we certainly would put more details than that in whatever final paper would be, I would think. Excuse me. And then I've also reached out to a few other communities across the state that have gone through this experience and still hoping to hear back.
One of the things I'll add is that I took away from the meeting with the folks who supported Linden. They were crystal clear about how they were successful in getting this done. And that was, it was driven by the community. They worked really hard to establish and collect the voice of community members in doing this. And for me, that really reinforced the importance of us of establishing a committee of community members to lead this process. And that, you know, we need to put our assumptions, our expectations, what we feel is, you know, might be the best avenue, set that aside and you know, let that committee drive the process. And so, I mean, for me, I really look forward to next steps of reaching out to recruit committee members, establishing some dates, first being the date of bringing folks into the Planning Commission, and then a timeline for that committee.
So speaking of which, when can we set that date for the special meeting?
I think it's difficult to do that without having all of the speakers committed. You know, at this time we have in effect one. So it's difficult for me to answer that.
Okay.
You know, I've reached out to a lot of people and I've only really gotten one commitment.
Is that the person from SpartanNet you're referring to?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. You have more, Nick, in your report?
No, that's been the thing that's been dominating most of my time lately, other than these couple site plans that we looked at this evening. Yeah, that really is what's taking up most of my time, so I'll leave it there.
Okay. Well, just before we leave that topic, so the special meeting. So if we're not getting a lot of volunteers for the special meeting, I wonder if we need to rethink either having it. I mean, we can appoint the committee without the special meeting. But, you know, even up to this point, you know, Nick, Jason, myself have been talking with people, sometimes individually. Nick has done a lot of the work, but, you know, we could share in a more comprehensive way what we have found, what we've learned, you know, if we can't find outside experts to come in and talk to us on these issues. I don't want to delay the appointment of committee members because we're having trouble getting this special meeting to happen. So I guess the question, do we need it? Or do we need to rethink what that means exactly? Jason?
I would argue that we establish a meeting date right now, and we stick to it. And what we do is we send out invites, not only to people who we feel are experts, but broadly, and just have a forum for a discussion. And those who want to play will make time to come to the meeting. It seemed like Spartan Internet they were excited. They wanted to show up to this meeting, and they could also open up doors to invite other people to that meeting. So I think they talked about representatives from WOW. I just think that we just need to start with that. And even if it's not a ton of people, that's okay. We have that kickoff meeting. In the meantime, between now and then, we can still do the recruitment. I know of, I think 4 individuals who we should reach out to, one of which I have reached out to, and that person has given a tentative agreement. We've got 2 others that we identified through prior work. And so the folks are out there. We have a meeting tomorrow to talk to the individual, to someone who is connected with other individuals within that, the ISP world. So I don't think we should delay in setting the meeting. I say we set it up and then we move forward with that.
I think I agree. So sooner rather than later, I think. I mean, not within days, but certainly within the next couple of weeks, I think, right? So are we fine with having the meeting at an evening time, or do we want the meeting to occur during the day, just to make sure that we get at least all the commissioners or many of the commissioners to come? Any problems with the daytime meeting with the intent of maybe getting more people involved, outside people involved, experts involved, or community members involved?
I don't have a problem with the daytime.
Okay. Should we look at our calendars? Jason, you had a suggestion, or you
No. Yes, calendars would be great.
Okay, so our next meeting is the 23rd?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, so we want to make sure we give people enough time to put it on their calendars, I think, but we don't want it too late either. What suggestions, anybody, for a date?
Dan?
Yeah, John.
Do we want to have a special meeting just for this topic as opposed to having it during a regular planning commission meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking a totally special time, special meeting.
Do we want to think about a weekend day? Like maybe a Saturday to just maximum, well, no, I'm sorry. If we're recruiting professionals, or, you know, a weekend day or a weekday would be preferable, right?
Yeah. I would think so, yeah. So next week is too early? Do people think it's probably too early to do it next week, late next week? No?
Too early.
Late next week, I think would be okay. I would like to remind everyone that Monday is President's Day, so the township will be closed. So, you know, the end of next week or the beginning of the week after that, although we do have that Tuesday Planning Commission meeting on the 23rd.
Yeah. So what do you think about the 18th or 19th, Thursday or Friday next week?
Thursday works better for me.
Okay, Thursday.
I mean, Friday's not out of question. I can make it work.
Okay, John?
Can we check with Taylor to see what her availability is? She's gonna have to set up a Zoom meeting for this, I presume.
Yeah.
I'm available either one of those days.
Anybody have a time preference? I can make either of those days work. And really almost any time except early morning Friday.
As long as you're not a monster like Bert who likes 8 a.m. meetings, I think we're okay.
Okay.
Anytime.
No? Okay. Would a Friday, so I guess you said Friday would work better, Stan? Or Thursday, sorry.
Thursday works better.
Thursday.
I can make Friday
okay.
work if we have to.
How about we just say Friday 1 o'clock? Does that sound like a reasonable time?
Sure.
I'm sorry, Thursday 1 o'clock. Did I say Friday? Thursday 1 o'clock.
That works.
Okay. All right, so communications, how do we communicate this meeting? So Facebook pages, right? What else can we do to get the word out that this is going to occur? Taylor, you might need to help us here too, just the communication strategy.
Yeah, so a mailing, it'd be cutting it close for mail.
Yeah.
To get all of that printed and stuffed and everything. So we can definitely push it out on our Facebook page and share it to the community pages. And I can do that a couple times this week or this coming week. I can definitely post it this week and then this coming week is what I meant to say. So I can do that. We can put it on, it'll obviously be noticed, so it'll go out that way as well. It'll be on our website. I can put it up there. I'm open to other suggestions as well for if anybody knows the best way to get things out to people outside of our area if we're trying to push for professionals.
So maybe Dan, Nick, and myself can meet and talk about the framing and the agenda for that meeting. Mm-hmm. I think, we have invited individuals, and then, who will have designated time to speak, and then we have public that also have time to speak, and we can think about prompts for that. The social media will work for the, our community members. But I do think, if with this, we already have a few contacts that we can reach out to, and then we can, divide and conquer to reach out to corporate reps for the local ISPs, and just give them, here's the time, you're welcome to join. If not, that's fine as well.
Okay. And the three of us, we're meeting tomorrow at 10, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So we can work on that then, and then we can give something to Taylor as far as language tomorrow, right?
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay. Anything additional to add on that point?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Okay, then we're moving on to public comment. I don't think there's anybody left from the public. Nope. So let's go to trustee comments. Ryan, do you have anything for us?
Not much. We talked about the committee piece. We continue to take little steps each meeting. Frankly, the things that we have spent the most time on and have been successful on have been things that have come from this committee. Many of the other committees don't have enough people to have quorum to meet at this point. So everything we've sent to the board, the SUP for Sunrise Forest, the medical marijuana license for Sunrise Forest, the changes to the zoning ordinance for office use, all those were approved and continue to move through the process. We appointed Dan right back here to the Planning Commission, and then we appointed 5 Board of Review members last meeting. So we continue to inch by inch move forward.
Thanks, Ryan. Any comments for Ryan? Questions? Okay, so then last opportunity for commissioner comments. So I think that we should talk about Webster Road a little bit. I mean, we're getting to the point where it's going to be a problem if nothing is done. Did Ray? Oh, Ray's still there. Okay. Yep. I mean, I am in complete agreement with Ray that, it seems that some trustees are, I think, reluctant to spend any money on Webster Road. I get that. I'm not sure I get the idea that we can't spend a little time thinking about and planning for whatever the future of that corridor is going to look like, and making sure that we have some say and that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot by allowing the county to do whatever it wants to do without some say in that process. And this seems to fall squarely in the laps of the Planning Commission, to have this conversation and to start thinking about this issue. And as I said before, I don't think we need to wait for the Board of Trustees to have that conversation. Yeah, obviously they're going to hold the purse strings and they're going to make the decisions on funding, but if we do nothing, we're going to get caught flat-footed, and it can't end well as it could if we could start talking about this a little bit.
Dan, I agree. And I think the other thing is that we need to look at not just the physical improvements, but what right-of-way requirements do we need? As that land gets developed, you know, Kessler side over there and others, if we decide all of a sudden we need to have 120-foot wide right-of-way, now is the time to get it, not after they've built something. So there's a lot of things to consider. It's not just the configuration of the road. That's important, but if we're going to sometime put a sidewalk down through there, we don't want to build it in a place where the road's going to be in the future. So there's a lot of things to think about.
Yeah. John?
I think Ray's spot on that one, because we need to be ahead of the curve on this. And as far as your comment about the trustees, the only comment I heard against spending money on Webster Road came from Supervisor Howell. She said she didn't want to spend any taxpayer money on Webster Road. It was up to the developers. And developers can't apply for grants. And according to Treasurer Wishwasher, there was potential for $2 million available in grant money to use for that project if we came up with matching funds. And I know the DDA has $200,000 that they could put into it if there was a functioning DDA committee that wanted to spend money on Webster Road. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Dan. Originally, the Planning Commission was going to do Webster Road, and then there was some interest in creating a special committee to do Webster Road, and that hasn't happened. So
exactly,
the Planning Commission can't be ahead of the curve here and go ahead with a plan for Webster Road, get the players together and move forward.
Yeah. Jason?
Just building off that last comment from John, the board what did authorize the formation of a committee. I went back to the meeting recordings. That authorization was voted on back in October.
That's correct.
And so I would recommend that Nick approach the superintendent and volunteer, sorry, Nick, that suggests that the Planning Commission is chomping on the bits, that we would like to move forward with this, and ask for her authorization to do that.
Can do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, that's a good first start. John?
Dan, maybe it would be well for you and I to get on that instead of just expecting Nick to carry the water for us.
Nick, if you want us there, I'm happy to be there too. Your choice, your call.
You know, the superintendent is well aware that the Planning Commission wants to tackle this issue. You know, there had been discussion about who would be on that committee that would look at Webster Road, whether that would be solely the Planning Commission or if there would be private entities involved, like utilities and things of that nature. You know, like Jason said, that was essentially voted on in October to form that committee or subcommittee, and not much has happened since. Obviously, we had the election, we had some change in the board, and then all of the fun that has happened at the board level since then has really kind of stalled that out. So, you know, I'm happy to prod at that a little bit again, but you know, I think there does need to be a conversation as to whether we want to ask the board to just hand this to the Planning Commission and let them go forward, or if we want to have a bigger discussion about possibly involving utilities.
So was the vote in October for advisory committee to the Board of Trustees, or did it specify? Because if not, the Planning Commission, just like we've done with the broadband issue, could assemble an advisory committee to the Planning Commission. I kind of hesitate to get the board involved, actually.
I don't recall, Jason, do you? I don't know what was clear.
I think we can clarify it at the next board meeting.
Okay, so that would be next Tuesday, the 6th.
I believe that township staff have been authorized by to move forward with the committee. I don't think there was a lot of discussion about who should be on the committee based on the board discussion. So again, I think just a green flag of moving forward, and we can pick it up and go.
John?
Ryan, you're our representative from the board. How do you feel about this?
Well, it's hard to comment because the board voted before my time. So I'm interested to hear what Al and Joe and Steve and Kathy, the folks that have been here prior. But my gut tells me the same as some of what you are all saying, that the more you get us involved, the worse it's going to be, and the longer it's going to take, and the further it's going to deviate from its original intent. So I think Jason's right. I think if the board can say, yep, that sounds great. They're functioning now. They've got enough members they can meet. Let's let them manage it. It sounds like a reasonable request.
Okay, so I guess then we all have some, or a few of us at least have some things to move forward, right? So Nick, if you need any help or you want any kind of support, let us know, okay?
Will do.
Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And support from Ray. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All right, great, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.